your seat.
Good morning. Good morning. You guys are more lively than the first service. That's awesome. All right, real quick. As a kid, I really enjoyed Legos as a kid. One of my, you have one of those memories, and one of my first memories of one of my first toys was a Lego. It's okay. I'll pick them up later. Don't worry. But does anyone else like Legos in here? Anyone grow up on Legos? Got a couple of them. You like Legos? Can you come over here real quick? I have a question for you, real quick. Come on. What's your name? Dan. What up, Danny? This kid's awesome. Okay, he came up. It's kind of nervous coming up in front of people. I have a question. Could you do something for me for the whole service? Whatever. Could you build me a fortress with all this stuff, or will you build me this? Pick which one? Which one do you want? You want to pick this one? All right. So you want to build a whole fortress with this. I like it. So you want to take some of these Legos back and build me a fortress with it? Can you do that for me? You do it and you just take that's cool. Either one. Yeah, okay. He's going to take this back and he's going to build a fortress. Go do it. All right, right in there. It might be a little distracting there, guys, but just, I'll try to be loud. All right, awesome. That's great. Guys, give him a round of applause. They did awesome. All right. I have a question for you guys today. I have a question. Have you guys ever procrastinated? Raise your hand, please. Oh, there's some good. There's some truthful people. There's some liars out there too. I'm joking. I'm a procrastinator. Pastor Ben, he doesn't like me because I procrastinate on emails. He sends me an email and I read it, but I never respond back to the email. And I see him the next day. He's always like, "Did you read my email?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, of course I did." Like, what do you think about it? You didn't respond. I was like, "Oh yeah," and then we go to conversation. And sometimes the parents, the youth pastor, got to communicate to the parents. I think the parents in the youth ministry are upset at me sometimes because they're always saying like, "What's going on this week? You haven't sent me an email, Billy." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I procrastinated. My bad." So I need to be working on that. But there's other types of procrastination too, right? Have you ever procrastinated in telling your parents something? Come on. Have any of you guys you had to tell your parents something, or you're going to get in trouble, but you prolonged the procrastination? Yeah, I see some head nods. One of the stories about procrastinating the punishment in my family was we moved from my family of 5 kids moved from a small trailer to a 3-story home. And for my mom, from a mom going from a trailer to a beautiful house, that was her dream. Finally I have a house instead of a trailer. And so me and my brother actually got our own room together. We used to share a room with my older sisters that are twins, and 4 kids in one small room. Didn't work well. But finally we got this amazing house. We had this amazing room. And so me and my brother, we turned our bedroom into a battleground, right? And when your mom, as a 10-year-old kid and an 8-year-old kid, my brother, when your mom folds up the laundry and she puts a basket of folded socks in a bundle in front of you, what does a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old think about? They think about sock grenades. Or I can throw this so hard at my brother it won't leave a bruise. Right? And so what me and my brother would do, we barricade each self on the other side of the room. We're just chucking at each other. And when you get dad's socks, they're like this big together, they're huge, and you just want to throw it across the room. So what happened was my brother was throwing socks at me, and I did this awesome dodge move, and I dodged. And it was a great dodge. It was on par with dodging. But what happened is where I landed into our wall. And there was a hole of a shape of a 10-year-old Billy about this big into the wall. And so I ran over to my brother and we had to make a pact. I was like, "Don't tell Mom. Please don't tell Mom, okay? All right?" And so my brother was like, "Okay, I won't tell Mom." So about 2 weeks later, and the whole masterful plan was to always keep our door closed. And then finally, my mom one day was like, "Let me in," and she opened up and there was a hole in the wall. And this was my mom, for a mom, that's her new house, and there's a massive hole in it, the size of a 10-year-old Billy. And so what happened was, I don't remember the punishment, but it was really big. But I procrastinated for about 2 weeks trying to hide this big problem in the house. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about a part in the Bible where the Israelite people procrastinated, where they waited. And what I have to do, though, to do that is we're going to be talking about, we're going to go into the book of Haggai, but we're going to talk about the history leading up to the book of Haggai. And this is going to be a long one. I might be talking a little bit fast, but bear with me now. We're going to go just all the way in our minds, go to the timeline of when the people were in Israel. Oh, not in Israel. They were the Israelites were in Egypt. They were enslaved by the Egyptians, and God raised up Moses to come and bring them out of that land. And they crossed the Red Sea, and when they were in the desert of Sin, God gave them the Ten Commandments, and then He called Moses to build the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle. And He got all the people of Israel and all their plunder from Egypt. They started getting all materials to build this amazing and wonderful and beautiful tabernacle, this tent for God. And in this tent was where the Ark of the Covenant stayed. And it was called the Holy of Holies. And there was a veil to separate from the people to going into that. Only the high priest could go, and only priests could carry the ark when they moved around. So we see that that's where they started to build the temple, not the temple, the tent and the ark where they could move it. And it was the center of the camp. When the Israelites stopped, that was the center. They wanted to make sure that everyone knew that their God, where he was with the Ark of the Covenant, that was the center of their whole life. And so the story goes on is that Moses passed away, and a generation passed away in the desert, and Joshua was the next leader. And he took the Ark of the Covenant, and he took the people, crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land, where God promised them to grow, to stay, to prosper. And at this time, they started conquering other cities and other nations, because that was their promise. And they were moving out the people that worship idols. They were moving them out, and they started building communities. They started building towns and town centers, and they started building a nation now out of the 12 tribes of Israel. Sorry, I'm stuttering everywhere today. Anyways, and so they started growing, and then there's a time period of when Joshua passed away, the time of the judges. And this was a time where the Israelites, they forsake God. They worship other idols. They started acting like all the other nations and kingdoms around them. They started to forsake God and go their own way. And it was like this cycle. And then they would be enslaved by the Hittites or the Philistines or the Moabites. And what would happen is they procrastinate and they would try to fight them themselves. But then they finally said, you know what, we got to stop this. We have to call upon the God that saved us from Egypt. And so this is this cycle, and then God would raise a judge to save them. But then they would, after the judge, they would fall into sin. And then God would save them with another judge. And it was just a cycle over and over and over again. And the whole time, at that time, actually, the Ark of the Covenant got stolen by the Philistines for a short period of time. It was a very a messy time for the Israelite people. But finally, they got their act together, and they were coming as a nation, but then they wanted something, and they asked for a king. They said, God, give us a king, give us a ruler to rule over us. We don't want any more judges, we want a king. And God was like, okay, I will give you a king. And he gave him King Saul. And King Saul was a man that he wasn't really after God's heart. He was kind of half-hearted with his seeking God. And so what happened is God replaced him with King David. And we know from King David, he's after God's own heart. He wanted to please God. And so David had this vision of giving where the tabernacle, the tent, where the Ark of the Covenant was. He wanted to give God a building. He wanted to give God a house for him to be blessed and God to be glorified. And God was like, that's a great ambition, but you know what? Your son is going to do that. And so we get to King Solomon, and King Solomon builds this amazing, wonderful temple. He goes and he has all the people. He gets the best timber. He gets the best rock. He gets the gold, and he furbishes it. And what's so amazing when we read in the Old Testament about like when Solomon's temple, when he's building this temple, is that where the holies of holies, this is like where the ark dwelled, is that the whole floor and the walls and the ceiling were covered in wood from top to bottom. And then on the wood was laid gold all over it. So it was a very precious and holy place. And above that, behind the Ark of the Covenant, was two cherubim where their wings would touch, and they would just these huge towers. And it was so amazing. It was so spectacular. The outside of the temple was adorned with gold and silver. The pillars were high. It was a beautiful place because they wanted to show that this was God's place. This was God's temple. And so that was right after that, after Solomon passed away, there was friction in the land. And there was friction where the 10 tribes split. And I talked about it in my last sermon, where the 10 tribes rebelled against the king of Judah and everything, and they split and became the north tribes and the southern tribes, this northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And what happened from there was that the north kingdom, they just kept sinning. Their kings were just evil after evil king, after evil king, after evil king. And so what happened was God said, if you don't serve me, if you don't seek me, and he kept sending prophets over and over and over again to them to bring them back. But they just kept rejecting over and over again. And so God was like, you can't be part of me anymore. And Assyria came down and took the whole 10 tribes of Israel. And even to this day, we don't know where the lost tribes are. They are scattered across the whole world because they never came back. But then Judah, I talked about King Hezekiah in one of my last sermons, that he held on to God and God's promises. And God kept Jerusalem safe, where they built the temple for a little bit longer. But what happened was they still turned their back to God. They still worshipped other gods. And so what happened was God was like, you need to learn. And what happens is when you don't come to me for your help and you try to do it on your own strength, you try to do it on your own power, you're going to go into captivity. And this is where Babylon comes in. And we see that there's this beautiful, amazing, wonderful temple. Jerusalem is just a jewel out in the Middle East. It's beautiful, it's made, and Babylon comes. And they destroy the walls. They destroy the city. And especially, they want to put a statement to the Jews. They want to put a statement to the Israelites to saying, hey, your God is not God. We're going to take it down. So they tore down this. They took all the gold. They took all the silver. They took all the power, everything. They just tore it down and broke it down and took it out. Took it away. And then they took all the gold and took it back to them. And then just to put insult to injury, they took all the people and said, hey, the remnant of you guys, you're coming with us. You're going to come to our capital and you're going to be under our foot, under our power. And then it goes to the time where we go through the history of Daniel and Esther and all them where the Jews are in captivity, but they are prospering under God's safety. But the whole time for the temple's where they had to sacrifice the lamb, their goats and their bulls to God for their sin. This meaning with the Jewish people, they are so lost without their temple. Because the temple is completely their culture. It's everything they stand for. It's everything they are, is because this is where they communicated with God. This is where they came into the near, very presence of God, and that was the temple. And when you take that away from that people, they are lost. They are broken. They don't know what to do. They couldn't, and the whole time they have this weight of sin on their lives, and they're like, our temple's gone. Everything is taken. And sometimes we talk about how it's kind of hard to connect with the Old Testament. Because sometimes we don't get the sacrifice of the thing, because what happens is because we sinned against God, about the human race sinned against God, there has to be a punishment. We rejected God as our ruler. And for sin, there must be shedding of blood. There must be a price to be paid for going against God. And for the Jewish people, God set up the sacrifice for the high priest to come in once a year to sacrifice and drip blood upon the mercy seat, the altar, to be forgiven, for the whole nation to be forgiven of their sins. And sometimes we kind of struggle with that, because you're like, isn't it like barbaric? That's kind of hard to think about as people are like how they basically killed innocent animals. But I have to say, I think today we really don't know the price of sacrifice. We don't know the price of the animal dying, because back then they grew that lamb to be perfect. They grew to have spotless, to have no defects, to be sacrificed. Nowadays, we don't even want to see the animal die. All we want to see the animal is a bun, some lettuce, and some cheese. Right? We don't see the animal dying for our sins. We don't see the life. And what the thing is, the father of the family would come up and at the altar of the temple would see the death of the animal and see the life going out of its eyes.